Rare is the wine that spends more time in a barrel. Rare are the vineyards that flourish in a more harsh and unforgiving land. Rare is the grape that is harvested by hand and crushed by foot. The wine is port, and this is Ports to Remember. A discovery of port wine from the grapes to the glass. Come, savor the wine. Harvest the grapes. Get to know the place and the people whose lives have been wrapped in the joy of port wine for generations. Join your host, wine writer and connoisseur Tony Aspler, in this celebration of Ports to Remember.
This wood is not for port barrels. It's for a boat that once conquered the raging Douro River. It's called a barco rebello, and it's a central feature in the story of the port producer Offley. Stay with me. When Ports to Remember returns, we'll hear about the tragic fate of the Baron de Forester, the most controversial figure in the colorful history of port. Two cities sit on the coast of northern Portugal, astride the Douro River, Porto and Vila Nova de Gaia. Porto gave its name to the country and its wine. Vila Nova de Gaia is the business heart of the port trade. Here you find the lodges of the port producers, the offices, blending rooms and cellars where the port ages to maturity. Porto and Vila Nova de Gaia are must-visits for all port lovers. The Offley Port Lodge has been the life work of Antonia Bessa. Well, welcome back to Ports to Remember. I'm Tony Aspler, and I'm with Antonio Basso, who is the general manager of Offley. Please have a seat.
Thank you, Tony.
Now, Offley, explain to me, because I always thought of it as Offley Forester, the Baron de Forester. Why just Offley?
As you know, the origin of the company comes back from 1737, where Mr. Etienne Offley decided to found this house to ship port to the UK. But soon after that date, the house had lots of changes in terms of their members.
Different names all the time?
Different names all the time,
yes.
Coming up till in 1809, James Forester joined the company that at that time became Etty, Escott and Forester. Soon after, there was a nephew of James Forester, Joseph James Forester, that in 1831 joined the firm.
And he was the Baron de Forester. He became
the Baron of Forester, yes. And he became really one of the big characters of this house.
Baron Joseph James Forester was a remarkable Englishman. Born in Yorkshire, he arrived in Porto in 1831 and dedicated his considerable energy to his new home and its wine. He befriended both Portuguese and British, generals and farmers equally, which was unheard of in the 19th century. His paintings and drawings record the port trade personalities of the time. He spent 12 years exploring and mapping the Douro River from Spain to Porto. His map is extraordinary, both in size and accuracy. More than 3 meters long, it details, among other things, 210 rapids. Ironically, his goal was to improve the navigation of the river, where boats foundered on the rocks and sailors drowned every year. During his explorations, Baron de Forester traveled in a barco rebello, the boat designed to navigate the raging rapids, carrying port downriver to Vila Nova de Gaia. I'll come back to the Baron de Forester's story, but first let's take a look at this amazing boat. Today, the art of building the Barco Rubella is all but lost. This may be one of the last to be built, the old-fashioned way. You can see the graceful curves and the high stern reminiscent of the Arabian dhow. Here, symmetry is more important than precise measurement. So a piece of string, spit, and a scrap of wood are just as effective as a tape measure. I'm sure a boat builder from centuries past could walk in here and feel right at home. For many years, barcos rubellas were the only transport from the Quinta up in the Douro Valley to Villanova de Gaia. Each producer had its own fleet and skilled boatmen to hurtle through the rapids. The broad beam adds stability in the rough water and would have left room for a small but comfortable home as the Baron de Forester explored the upper reaches of the Douro. However, it was the Baron's exploration of port production that caused uproar and conflict in the trade. It made the Baron more enemies than friends. Baron de Forester decried the adulteration of Portuguese wine with elderberries and colouring agents such as oxblood. He also fought valiantly to stop the practice of adding grape brandy to stop fermentation. He felt it was better for the fermentation to continue and produce a dry wine. Baron de Forester wanted the wine to be fermented to dryness?
Yes, because he liked those kind of wines. He thought that the Douro had potential to make great wines.
Well, what would it have tasted like? What would it have been like? Should we try and see?
Yes, probably it will taste like table Douro wine.
Okay, well, we have here your 1992
LBV.
late bottle vintage. That's port, the natural port made by stopping the fermentation with brandy. And this is a table wine made by port grapes. And this has not been stopped with brandy. Of course, it's table wine, and this is what Baron de Forester really wanted then. So this is what port would have been if he got his way.
Yes.
Now, very dry. Well, let's have a look at your whole product line. Why don't we go and see that?
Yes, you are welcome to it.
Thank you. Aha! Tasting room.
Yes. Well,
hello.
Tony, I present you our winemaker, João Silva Souza.
Pleased to meet you.
Tony.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, now I'll leave you alone and you'll have the opportunity to explain you all about the winemaking of Offley. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Okay, see you later.
Right.
Bye.
Okay, so this is your product line.
We can show you our range of whites, from the driest to the sweetest, and then the reds, all the reds, and we can start with the young wines.
The young rubies,
Yes, and then
LBVs.
young tonies, LBVs, and then vintage, and then the oldest products,
Okay.
old tonies.
Well, yeah, you know what I would really like to know? The difference between a ruby and a tawny in terms of how you select the wines. You know, when do you know what a wine will become? Why don't we take a couple of samples? What have you chosen there?
I've chosen a tawny,
Okay,
4 years old, and a ruby with almost the same age. We can see the difference in color.
it's difficult to tell the difference really between these two colors because
Okay.
they're both so young, but show us an older tawny.
I can show you an 80 reserve,
Okay.
1980 reserve. I think the difference it's quite dramatic.
So that is the ruby, and that is the tawny,
The
and
old
you
tawny,
get
yes.
yeah. Okay, there's something here that is remarkable. I've never seen one of these before.
Yes.
This is a black glass.
Yes.
What do you use a black glass for?
To focus on nose. We must not see the color, and we have to concentrate on what the wine smells.
And why wouldn't you want to see the color?
Because color tells you a lot of things about what the wine is. So if you don't want to know what the wine is and you have to make the good decision, you use the black glasses.
I need a pair of black glasses myself. Okay, now what happens if I do this and give that to you? What are you going to tell me from that?
It's a 1975.
Very good.
Okay, but in this glass you cannot see the color. It's impossible.
So
you only have to focus on what you smell. Okay, this is the true blind taste.
I'm focusing on my nose.
Yeah.
Smells of tobacco to me.
Yes.
Black glass.
Yeah.
You won't see many of these around. After the cool quiet of the tasting room, I walk down towards the Douro River. I wonder how long these cobblestones and walls have stood here. Obviously long before the car. On the quayside, the Mercado da Ribeira is awash with household items, tourist souvenirs, and friendly vendors. Little tiny bottles of port, look at that. See, the kind that you might get on aircraft. Excellent. Here I find evidence of how important the Barco Rebello remains. Not just in the history of port, but to the people of Porto. Very pretty. It's a good souvenir of Portugal. Thank you. These are models of the Barca Vela that will be racing from Foz right up to the bridge here. As you can see, this was how port was actually transported down from the Douro Valley to Villanova de Gaia, where it is aged in those lodges across the water. Stay with me. When Ports to Remember returns, we'll take part in the annual regatta of the Barcos Rebellos. The wine farms for Port, the Quintas, are in a demarcated area about 150 kilometers upstream from the coast. In the Cima Corgo, the area above the mouth of the Corgo River, we find Quinta Boa Vista, one of the larger wine farms of the Offley port producer. Quinta Boa Vista lives up to its name. The farm has a beautiful view indeed. Even here, in the Douro Valley, where the panorama can be just another look at the river, I feel relaxed and peaceful with these endless vistas to admire. At the same time, I'm awestruck by the work that went into the construction of this vineyard. Trudging the slopes with Antonio Bessa, I think of carrying grapes during harvest. That's work enough, but imagine building all these terrace walls. It must be at least the equivalent of building a pyramid. Today they have machines, but these walls were put up by hand 150 years ago. The schist, the hard shale-like rock of the Douro Valley, was placed here piece by piece. As I walk, I wonder how many times the Baron de Forester himself had climbed these stairs. When the Baron de Forester bought this property, Boa Vista, in the 1850s, he lived in that house up there on the hill. Not exactly that house, but on the site of that house. And the port was made in the lagers behind. But it had to be got down this hill to the river in order to be transported to Villanova de Gaia. The Douro River is wide and slow-moving these days, but in the Baron's time, before they built the dams, this river was narrow and full of rapids. In order for the Baron to get his port to market, he had to have the pipes rolled down this hill, down to the river where it would be loaded onto the barcos rebellos. Now these are the original lagers that the Baron de Forester would have made his port in. And what's interesting about them is that they have a gravity feed off the lagers so the wine could drop straight down into wooden vats below. These days, when a quinta owner wants to actually renew a vineyard, he'll try to do it down a slope as a solid block because it makes it easier to work. But some of the slopes in the Douro, in fact most of them, are just too brutal to plant that way, so they have to revert to the old tried and trusted terraces, like these. Still, despite modern construction methods, the harvest brings work that's hardly changed since the Baron lived here. The people still carry the heavy loads of grapes up the hill, time after time, till the harvest is done. Not far from here is the Kishan De Valera, where the Baron de Forester was last seen alive on May 12, 1862. He was returning from lunch at Quinta de Vesuvio with another port producer, Donna Antonia Ferreira, and her daughter. Their boat capsized in the rapids. The ladies were kept afloat by their crinolines. The Baron drowned, weighted down by his money belt that was full of gold to pay his workers. His body was never found. Today, the river has been tamed by dams, and the Douro has become a place of recreation. Pleasure boats ply its waters between the looming mountains. They don't have to run the rapids anymore. There are locks at each of the dams. I'm sure the people who grew up here take these hills for granted, but for a visitor like me, they're a revelation. Eco-tours are growing in popularity in the Douro as more people from around the world discover the grandeur of this valley. Today, the Douro Valley has wonderful places to stay, like Posada Barro de Forester in the town of Alijo, where I stayed. It's hard to tear yourself away. I do, however, and return to Porto. In Porto, on the quay by the river, I see echoes of the Barco Rebello. This will be a much larger boat designed to carry tourists, not pipes of port. But you can see how the original design lives on. I'm standing here on the quayside at Oporto, and behind me is the city of Villanova de Gaia. It is here that the Douro River, which starts in Spain as the Duero and flows into Portugal as the Douro, ends up here in Oporto and Villanova de Gaia, and it empties into the Atlantic at Foz. And it's at Foz where the regatta, featuring those old barca vela, those old boats, will begin, and they'll race to the bridge behind me. That bridge was actually designed by Eiffel, the designer of the Eiffel Tower, and it is, as you see written across it, a World Heritage Site. I'm watching the race with the crowd on a tour boat organized by the Confraria de Vino de Porto, the Brotherhood of Port. Their members wear the traditional red robe. Chatting with the others about this race, I discover many interesting facts.
É ato promocional, porque hoje se festeja o dia da cidade do Porto.
Isabel Marana of the Port Shippers Association tells me that the regatta is scheduled to coincide with the St. John's Day festivities. St. John is the patron saint of the city of Porto. This annual celebration is the city's biggest. And while we chat, the race begins downriver. Boats bearing the names and colours of port producers line up across the mouth of the Douro, sails flying, and the long sweeping tail extending from the high stern. Some of these Rebello boats are restored, some reproductions of the original workboats. They race from the Foz, the mouth of the river, to the Dom Luis Bridge. It's only about 5 kilometers, but the competition is fierce. The best lane this year is the one closest to the windward shore. That's where the wind is strongest today. These boats are hard to control. In past years, some have gone aground. Others have been blown together, like chariots in a race. Still, the competition is all in fun, and the winner proudly displays the trophy till the boats form a line again. This spectacle that attracts thousands of people happens every year in June, one of the best times to visit Porto. Stay with me. Ports to Remember will be right back. Vintage port has a very, very long cork, so when it comes to opening it, make sure that you have a corkscrew with a very long helix. This one is extraordinarily long, so let's see. Let's plunge in, keep turning, and the cork will ride up the shaft. And once you've pulled the cork, throw it away because you don't need it again. Vintage port, once it's opened, should be consumed within 24 hours. You've been watching Ports to Remember. Join me for the next program in the series.